Yozo can't understand how to act in society. Family is a valuable agent in fostering conformity to the demands of outside society. There were virtually no group he could belong to. So you're isolated. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to react? Resisting by being inauthentic doesn't work. Perhaps, maybe the solution to being inauthentic is being completely overly sincere to everyone around you.
All here to say that, I'm so sorry.
Perhaps this extreme sincerity of the individual's emotions and experience will confess an authenticity that will force a connection with the society that you live in. This is a great idea. This effort is particularly seen in Yozo's overstating narrative. The beginning statement of Yozo's narrative is, "Mine has been a life of much shame." This statement is the first example of Yozo's consistent exposure of his character, unembellished, not at all trying to make himself seem better than he is. This act of reveal has two purposes. The first purpose is the effort to make a connection with society by placing them in a position of confidant, done particularly by divulging unsavoury aspects of his character, which usually are only exchanged when the sharer is intimate with an individual. The second purpose is that by expressing what he sees as his flaws and moral failings, he is placing himself in a position of penance, where society takes on a religious authority of absolving his sins after his confession. What Brudnoy states for the author is a suitable description for Yozo. He strives, Dazai I'm talking about, to overcome his isolation through his sincerity and confession. The confession of the unadorned, unpleasant parts of Yozo's character is essentially seen in his unabashedly poor opinion of women. Without a hint of obfuscation, Yozo states that he is often felt that he would find it more complicated, troublesome and unpleasant to ascertain the feelings by which a woman lives than to plumb the innermost thoughts of an earthworm. He's also seen treating women callously, often taking advantage of their willingness to please, admitting when asking his landlord's daughter to complete an errand only to get her out of the way, that he was well aware it never offends a woman asking them to do an errand. They are delighted if some man deigns to ask them a favour. Though it seems reasonable that this overabundance of sincerity seems like it would force a connection with society, thinking, if I lay all my cards out on the table, they know my intimate and unsavoury aspects, they are bound to feel closer to me. The reality, as it shows, is that being overly sincere only leaves the individual open to further judgment, ridicule, and being taken advantage of, with no hint of elevating the oppressive alienation that the individual is suffering under. The futile nature of being overly sincere to make a connection is symbolised in Yozo's interaction with an old jailer after his first voluntaria morte attempt. When the policeman asks Yozo, "You miss her, don't you?" Yozo agrees, at that point presenting himself as completely vulnerable, cloaked in a kind of simple sincerity, feigning utter dejection. But instead of becoming sympathetic and comforting, the policeman's manner becomes increasingly self-important, such to the point that he presents himself with an authority almost indistinguishable from that of a judge. It becomes clear that the policeman is only asking Yozo to reveal this intimate part of his life because he wishes to while away the long autumn evening by extracting a confession. The policeman is shown to be a representative of common understanding society, who takes selfish advantage of the experiences told with this over-sincerity. Moreover, Yozo confessing to the policeman brought Yozo no benefit whatsoever. He was still brought in for the real examination with the police chief, to be heartlessly judged without compassionate concern for his experience. Another reason why over-sincerity is inefficient in forcing a connection in society is that it comes off as the opposite of sincere, that is, unpleasantly exaggerated and fake. Yozo is aware of this fact himself when he writes to Flatfish, the man who gives him lodging after he is released from prison, that he was going to visit Horiki and that he is going to return that night without fail, and that he was, quote unquote, telling the truth. This seemingly solemn note hides the fact that Yozo left the note hoping to pacify Flatfish for a little while, and was done out of compulsion to add some sort of embellishment to every situation, out of a desire to please. Not only this, Yozo knows that this embellishment of sincerity was a quality which made people call him at times a liar, and that it would later turn to his disadvantage. Brudnoy explains in simple terms that this quality in reference to the author. Dazai overstates. He tells us more than is necessary and envelops us in an aura of exaggeration which points up what might be taken to be an element of insincerity in his writing, one which at least evinces doubt, if not disbelief, as to claim that he wrote primarily from a standpoint of absolute sincerity. A stinging example of Yozo's over-sincerity backfiring is of when Yozo exaggerates a cough to a district attorney, another representative of the authority of society, thinking that this cough might prove useful. However, instead of sympathy and leniency, the district attorney reacts with suspicion and disdain, asking simply, was that real?
I don't know if you're provoking me or not, but I'm getting tired of this.
It would appear that being inauthentic, being overly honest and deprecating does not lessen one's isolation or alienation in society. Rather, it does the opposite. All that being overly sincere in this way does is allow society to take advantage of your confession, judge your actions and flaws, and be skeptical of your sincerity. Dazai shows that this is obviously not the answer to remove isolation. In the end, not only are you still alienated, you are also now an embarrassed, stark, naked human, betrayed by your excessive disclosure. We seem to be out of options for resistance, aren't we? So resisting isolation is impossible within the framework of no longer human. Fine then, if one cannot force society to accept oneself, is there a way to negate isolation? That is, make it so the painful effects of isolation doesn't affect the individual, even if it does not get rid of their isolation in reality.
I've made a severe and continuous lapse in my judgment, and I don't expect to be forgiven. I'm simply here to apologize.